Everybody, we'll just give everybody a chance to get queued in here. Beautiful Tuesday. All right, we got a great turnout and a great set of questions already pre-submitted today. But good evening, good morning, and good afternoon, wherever you're tuning in from. Welcome to Decisions Lunch and Learn. My name is Morgan Russell. My pronouns are they, them, and I'm excited to be with you. I'm on the solutions team from Decisions, So I'm excited to work through some questions that we've got today. We do have a few pre-submitted to go through first, but if you have additional questions as we go through, feel free to type them into chat or write them down. So if you want to verbalize it, but we're still working on another one, raise your hand and we'll get that all addressed. All right, so real quick, just want to also touch on, we do have the upcoming event of Decisions Days next week, which is crazy. It's going to be October. So looking forward to seeing as many people as we can customize and such. Yeah, very excited for Decisions Days. It'll be great right over here in Norfolk, Virginia. So a fun in-person event to learn about decisions. So let's get started with the first pre-submitted question that we got later in the day yesterday. So let me see if I can pull this up here to reread that whole question for us. So we have our first question is looking for a setup to send a report as an email on a schedule. And they'd looked into doing the snapshot functions and found the article on that, but didn't see the option to actually send that report via email. And then looked for other things in the documentation, but couldn't find the particular thing we wanted. So for this particular use case, the snapshot's good. It doesn't, when I went through, I hadn't used it before, but I went through, didn't have any options besides just you get that snap of the actual report. So what you want to actually do here is use a scheduled job. And that's going to allow you to queue up on whatever time frame you'd like your email to actually run. So I put together a real quick Lucid chart, and we'll make it also in Decisions right after we talk through this. So first looking here, you want to make your flow that you're going to run on your schedule. So you'll probably have some more steps and additional logic than what's laid out here, but this is on just that simplistic view of what we want to accomplish here. So this is the flow that's going to run the report and then send the email. Depending on what you're doing in between that, steps may vary. So when you hit your run your report, you want to output as file data. I've listed here, there's several types of file data you can choose on your return data option in your step there. And we'll talk about that a little bit, but you can send it as a PDF, an Excel sheet, or a CSV, depending on what you want to do, how you want it presented in your email. Then using your send email step, you're just going to map that in as an attachment. And that'll just make it whoever you send that email to and queued off. So the newer part to this, because I'm sure you've probably seen those steps before, is the actual scheduled job. So this will run based off whenever you set it up. So scheduled job, this is the definition from our doc site, has flows that can be set hourly, monthly, weekly, and on a particular schedule when you're transforming data regularly. To do this, what you're going to have to do is navigate to System, Events and Jobs, Schedule Jobs, and we'll walk through these lower steps here in which you're going to name the job, pick the flow. So for this flow that we're picking in this use case, it'll be selecting this flow that we created above. And then lastly, you'll be setting up the actual schedule. So it has a few options there, such as daily, weekly, monthly, or like we said, that custom time span. So what we can do, and I believe you're in version 6. So let me go over to this Karma instance that I have up. Localhost, here we go, Viscarma. So I'm already in the scheduled job sections. Let me move back up to my folder to make that flow. So here we're just going to, so I got to move around some of this, create our flow. And just going to be a regular flow type. So we just create a simple flow. So we're going to say it's using that run report. and send email. And I'm going to put in parentheses so I can know for later that it's going to be the one that I'm using for my scheduled job. You could also add that potentially as a tag, depending on what you'd like to do there. So once we create that, real simple, we're going to drag out our run report step. And excuse me if I'm a little slow, super used to working in 7. So when the toolbox is on the other side, it takes me a sec. So we're doing run report step. And you just drag it out. And based off whatever report you want to send, you just select that report here. So we can either create one real quick or go and select one. Just for a quick one, we can create an accounts one. But in this use case, it sounds like you've already got your report created. So, oops, get accounts for our data source. Just be account there, perfect. And add whatever fields, do whatever filtering you want to have. You can add subtotals, all that kind of thing will actually move over when you run that report. So we'll just add a couple of fields here and save. Once your report is all ready, we're going to go back and close out of here to return to our flow editor. There we go. And like I said, these are the data return options that you want to choose from. You can pick a particular type. That's like a data type in Decisions. Data rows, so it's individual rows. It's easier to process individual line items and stuff that way. CSV file, PDF file. Excel is more in line with this use case from what I can tell. So you might want to attach it as a PDF, might want to attach it as an Excel so that whoever you're receiving that can process it better. The output then, if you pick this type, is going to be a file data, which will make it great and easy for you to just attach to your send email step. So I'm going to just rename this as, what do we pick? Excel report. And then lastly, let's grab our send email step. And we just want to use a regular send email step. We got a bunch of subflows in here. So what I tend to do in a project, if I'm sending a lot of emails and formatting them very similarly, I'll just use a subflow to do it. Send email template. It's hiding from me. There we go, send email. Line that up. Nudge it up a bit. Okay, and then whatever you set for your from address. And your list, whoever you're sending it to on this regular basis. This could be a group. So maybe in between here, you'd fetch all the groups and then map in here the list of all group emails. And then just for the use case, you would be attaching your file from the report run. And that's why this is going to be dynamic. It's pulling in the data fresh every time this runs. It's not going to be just the one report, from that particular time frame. It's running every single time this flow runs and then sending that updated version. So we build array on that since for this use case right now, we only have one attachment. So then we're just going to have that one item and we're going to pick it, which selects it from flow and grab that Excel report, which is what we renamed our output to be. And I'm sure our end step is hiding. There we go. And pull that up here and just line it up. I know we've got some pop-ups mad because we didn't fill out the body or the subject, as you know, which our email would need. But that is the general gist of that there. Let's do a quick and I'll just build array to the current user. Actually, that'll be system if it's the other way. So we'll just put in mine as a constant. .com. See if it'll be my friend. Nope, gonna have to click it first. We'll just make it a constant list so we're only doing the one. Giving us a quick buffer. This server's got a lot of stuff on it. And then once this is mapped in, well, let's actually just close out and come back in for it. We're going to go and make the actual scheduled job, which is again located in system. Here it is. So this is usually by default closed in the beginning. Open up your system and then go to jobs and events. And then in jobs and events, you'd select scheduled jobs. So in here, we've got some already existing from some demos that we have on this environment. You would then hit new scheduled flow up top. And you give it a name. So if we're, daily report, send to team, specify what you want. And you're going to pick that particular flow that we just made. So it should be under our recent run report and send email, scheduled job. You pick your flow. You could also create one here. The only thing I would suggest not doing that, just because its folder will, the flow itself will exist in this folder and it might be hard to find later. So I would suggest building your flow out first before coming in here. So then you can know where it is exactly tied to a project and such. Let's see, start date, you can specify a particular time you want this to begin kicking off and such, and expiration if you want it to only run for this year and then stop, or a month and such. And then you can pick from some predefined schedules like first, last day of the month, monthly. Time span is the one where you have complete control over it and you get to specify the exact amount of time that kicks off down here in the time span.
So for time span, sorry, this is the question I put in the chat. In version 6, you could not do every 15 minutes between 9 and 5. Is that available in version 7? I know you're in 6, so I know it doesn't work in 6. Can I do that in 7?
I believe the functionality is the same. I have not checked specifically for that, so we can look together if you'd like, just to double check that. But from my knowledge just off the top, I don't believe they've done much to change how the scheduled jobs function in 7.
Okay.
Yeah, so my gut reaction to that is no. So you just want it every 15 minutes from 9 to 5. You could do some particular logic in your flow. So maybe this flow kicks off every half an hour. And then you would check whenever it runs, if it's going, if the time zone, if the current time equals in the time of 9 to 5 in your flow. So even though it runs more often, it would not do the rest of the logic. So you'd have like some kind of rule in between that says, is it 9 to 5 or is it outside of 9 to 5 business hours? There is a thing that's about business hours in here.
Yeah, I was about to say, isn't there scroll? Yeah, or like scroll up a little bit, Morgan. Let's see, time span. If you expand, expand that.
So we have daily schedule. Let's take a look.
Hit that up, and I think now you can configure the hour that you want to run and then the days you want it to run. So I think that's where you'd get that.
Oh, that would be like 9:15 once a day. I don't think that would be multiple times.
Right, and that's what we have now is 9:15, 9:30, 9:45, 10 a.m.
So gotcha. So you have one for each of them.
For each, really.
Yes.
Gotcha. Yeah. So that's a lot.
Yeah.
I would
exist, but I was just curious to see if there was something.
Can you expand the daily schedule information, Morgan, right there under calendar information?
So this is all the options again. So a specified job schedule.
Not there. I wanted to see this thing. I'm just curious. Right here. Oh, okay, that's just a weird UI. Okay, I thought that had further configuration to get kind of what we're talking about.
Yeah, that tucks this under here. So whether or not so this is going on 1 day specified job schedule. Yeah, so
gotcha.
I think time span schedule is your best bet for it, and have it maybe run every half an hour and check to see if it's within that time span, or run every 15 minutes and just have a rule. So in
the flow itself, have a rule
in the flow itself, exactly. Check to see, is the current time within this window, true, false, and on the false path, you don't send an email, you just say it's done. That's what, so you just have that one scheduled job running, but it would still do some more logic in for you to take care of that excess. You don't want to bother people outside of 9 to 5. So that's that would be my suggestion on that. Did you have any follow-up questions on that, or did that answer?
No, I have an unrelated question. I'll put it in the chat and wait my turn.
Okay, no worries.
Okay.
Let me slide over. I did manage to real quick throw together a lucid chart for our second question. Let me try to read it real fast for us. So our second pre-submitted question was about using a grouping step to get a grouping from a list, and then using a branch for each to make an assignment to each person in that group in parallel. However, when you want to hit the last group, you want to know so you can make a particular, probably a different assignment for the last one. And they said they basically were asking if there was a step or a way to essentially count the number of groups in my list to compare to know what you're on. And absolutely you can. Let me slide over to my second tab here. I did a quick wireframe out of a flow of what I interpreted that as. So you're fetching your groups or whatever particular thing you're getting. And then you're doing a for each, and then actually having, some assignments in your branch merge step here. What I would suggest is have whatever you're sending through that list of items first subtract to get a count -1, and we're doing that. So it can be compared to the index, because index will start at 0. So it'll be your count -1 will be the index of your last item in that list. Yes. And then what you would do in your for each loop is have a just a number equals step. And in your number equals step, you can set it up where you say the index of the last one, which is what we just got here, is it equal to the index of the current item you're on. So when you go for each, you have that item that you're currently on as well as its index. And we can look at that together in the flow in just a second. Yeah, and that way you can route, is it the last one or not?
Sure. So that's how I had it originally. And let's say, imagine that I have a list. We'll call it routes, for example, right? And each of these routes has an
Real quick,
order.
are you working in 6 or 7?
This is 6.15.
Okay. Cool. Let me jump back over there then. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, so I have a list, let's say 10 items in this list, and I have 3 of them that are 1, 3 or 2, 3 or 3, and 1 is 4, right? So like what you just illustrated there, that's how I originally had it, to go through each one of those items individually. But what I want to do is go through them as a group, right? So I want to be able to essentially process that approval to where everyone in group 1 has to approve it before it can go to group 2. So I put in a for each in group step, and that for each in group doesn't output an index of the group in the list the same way that a for each outputs the index of the item. So I guess what I'm looking for is there any step or something else that I can get?
So I see you're using the group.
Essentially the index of the group is what I'm after. Does that make sense?
Yes, I see what you're saying there. I'm trying to remember on using that one. For each in group step. There we go. It's been a little while. Field in group. So you're sorting by that group. So you're going through each group. I see.
Yeah. And I think after I submitted this question, I think I may have figured it out and realized that I may be an idiot for even submitting that
No worries.
question.
That's half of the battle with decisions. You're totally fine. There's so many things to try and figure out in here. So I'll just put together this quick example because I haven't used this step. I did it a while ago for a onboarding candidate process. Like I said, it was a little while ago. So you're going through each group. We pick our collection. Just for example, we're doing accounts. And then you group by a particular field. So say we want it to be all account types. So each account type will go through differently. So then actually in the step, let me just add when you're on a step, what is accessible Data Explorer wise for each grouping account? First count, last count. Yeah, so it definitely is not showing you the number.
Yeah, so the way I think I resolved this in my mind, and tell me if this is, I guess, the best way to do it, right? So sure. Before I get to that for each in group step, I stuck in another step that says find last in list, right? So I'm going to find the last one in my total list, and I'm basically going to put an account entity in there, right? And then inside my loop, I'm going to put a rule that says take the last one, because the one that I'm using is an int, right? So it makes it easy. So I'm going to say take the last one in that list, and then for each group, take either the first or the last and compare it to that number, right? Because
Compare what's in here.
because everything in that group should be the same, right? So then I can know, am I on number 3 for the group, but my last in list is 4, so I'm not on the last one yet.
Because
Right.
you're comparing for each group in here, the last, or each group of groups on the outside of it. So you have
group
like,
of
say
group.
this was right now in this example, it's like different accounts. So if these are account types, you have machine versus person. So are you trying to see if it's the last different account type that you're looking at, or the last?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Okay,
the
yeah, then
last
that
of
works
the
on the
groups.
outside.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, no, I think that makes sense.
Yeah.
I think usually last is also something that's available already in flow data for a list. So you might not need this step unless it's providing more value than just showing what particular thing is in the last. Off the top, when you look at something that's in a list, though, it's accessible off the bottom. If you scroll all the way down, it's like first and last. So it might already be there if just that's the data you need.
Okay. Yeah,
Sometimes it's useful to find like a particular element, find the first in the list that has this kind of content, or like the matches there here that you use that. So this has that edit rule, which is going to say, hey, find the last in the list that matches this rule. So if there's a particular criteria you need to meet, I would use this step. But if it's just the very last one, I think that's going to be accessible in your flow.
I see. Okay. I didn't think about that. I'll put that in there. And then I guess the other thing was I basically need to write back the approval or the denial thing back to an external database. So I need to keep track of the current level and last level, but I just threw in a create data with basically a container to keep me account of what's happening on the inside of that.
Yeah, show you where you're at exactly, and then add or subtract or keep that going in your loop.
Okay,
that makes good sense. But this was a good step to find, though. The first and last step are really good. It's just when you need a particular criteria is when it's useful there.
Gotcha. That's helpful. Thank you so much.
Yeah, no problem. Okay, we have one more pre-submitted. Did you have any follow-up on that, or is that okay for you?
Okay. No, I'm good.
Cool. All right, so this last one, I have not got to make a lucid chart, but it says, how would you view a completed form with decimal values stored in PII? Currently, when you retrieve values, they're coming back up as 0.00. So I'm not very familiar with PII, what that stands for. Is it a particular format of a decimal there?
It's personal identifiable.
Okay, gotcha.
So it's like encrypting the date of member field so that, like, someone's social security number, you don't want to just have that
exactly.
clear text.
Okay. We're going to retrieve the values. They're coming back at 0.00. Okay, so I guess you'd have to convert it back. I do not have direct experience with that. Jared, have you worked with something similar, or can talk more on that?
I have not worked on it. Yeah, I would say let's create a quick form. Let's play with it, and you can also do it from the data structure. From what I've heard, I think there is a process, and maybe I think Brian has worked on it a little bit. But I think you have to like decrypt that in order to have it in a viewable format in the form, because since it's set as that way when it's stored, so if you retrieve it, it's going to be in this encrypted gobbledygook, and you have to decrypt it in order to display it as the clean text. But Brian can probably speak to more on that.
No, I've never personally done it, but I am aware of how we handle it in terms of the fact of us encoding it in a way that's not as easily accessible, because for obvious security reasons. I haven't directly, I had to work with it myself.
All right.
Gotcha.
And we'll do the fun thing. We'll just play around with it and we'll see what happens.
Okay, so we're outputting as a decimal is what we'd like to do. Formatting there. Input, output, auto select. Okay, so we want to pass it back in and show it on a form where it's not just an empty value. Yeah, because 0.00, from my knowledge, is just that default, like what it comes in pre-populated as. So my first thought there is potentially it's not coming through, or it's just not converting properly. I'm trying to see the best way to, let's get this in a flow real quick, to actually mimic how it's getting encrypted there. So how would I encrypt something?
Go to create a data structure, Morgan. And when you click on a data member and you got properties for the data member, there's one called PII or enable PII. You can check that box and then that should encrypt, and they just kind of write a record to it. So yeah, try
Okay,
database
sounds
structure.
cool. Well, we'll do a simple database structure. We'll say PII example real quick. We'll go back through and change our namespace so it's perfectly lunch and learn, and example data. Okay, so over here in properties, there we go, contains PII. So we check that off. Is that the only field we'd like to select there? Contains PII. We'll do a string and a decimal. So like the number. Well, I guess it wouldn't be a decimal. That would be a string as well. But not a list. But we'll just have a few things. So we'll make this one type a decimal since that's what we're looking at. Okay, so that's our quick example there. Changed our namespace and going back through, making sure it contains PII on both of them so we can test that out. So PII example is our simple database structure. So we'll let it slowly cook for us and we'll go and pass that into our form. See what we need to do to convert it. Okay, sweet. Let's go back to our beautiful flow and drop in our form, which if I search for it, see if we can get that form there. Oh, that's our flow again. We want this. Okay. And just to show it, we'll quickly create and fetch something of that type. So that's a simple database structure, and we named it example PII. Or was it PII example? There we go. Scroll down, we'll drag a quick create and drag a quick get all for it. Maybe a selective update if you're updating on the other end, but just to create one real quick so we can pass something in. Let's do it. And we'll build out our data because we're just going to pipe in what we want it to be for this quick example. So our decimal, I'm going to do, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.789. And our SSN will be a beautiful 2, 3. And we're just going to run through and create that. So I will debug it so I can run through that step. So now we have that created. We'll go ahead and get all of them, which we know is only one for testing purposes, and pass it in here. I'm just going to do array first item since we know we're just talking about that one that we're looking at, and I'll rename it as example record. So now we're going to pass in our example record and map in. We just have that decimal, but we can go back and add our other fields to it. So our example decimal will save there. Save this. Let me grab my end step that is floating somewhere. There we go, down here, tucked away. We might add that selective update after, but for now, let's just get us to the end. Real quick, I've got to add another field or our string on our really stylish form here. Let's just do a text box. Text box. And shift enter to just drop the label on top. And we got its data name already in there. We'll save, close, and map that in before we run this and see how it's working for us. Might have to click on and back off. Get that text box for us. So now drilling back into our PII example record, we're going to grab that string that we were looking at. I could have done a masked text box, masked, trying to say that K is killing me, to get it to format all nice in here. But real quick for the example, Okay, that start step is so far away. And it's beautiful. And we'll quickly horizontally distribute these. Okay. Let's debug this and see what we're shown on our form. We know what we just put in on our last one. So for mine, I was able to get it to come through just fine. So let me see how it looks in the data as it moves through. So I'm going to look at our output data, came back through. So it is visible here as the correct data, and then it gets mapped in here correctly. For anyone who has experience with this, is this the norm that it would show up as you saved it previously without requiring any kind of conversion?
So try to, that's a database structure, right?
Yes.
Open up it in the report viewer and let's view it there. Because I think that's when we'll see that PII behavior. And you can correct me if I'm wrong, Janice, if that's not how you have your setup.
But
I think
from what this is showing, that if you're fetching the data, potentially the data is not pulling in correctly there and popping up on your form, because that 0.00 is that default. So it might be something mapping wise there. But let's take a look at the report while we're doing it. Let's make a report, just a default report, and we'll call it our PI example report. And we'll quickly add that as our data source once it lets me. There we go. And we'll add our beautiful fields. Okay, yeah, so they do show up here as encrypted, but when you fetch them in the flow, they actually are not encrypted. So maybe if you're running your data from a report or some other system where it's encrypting it, you're not able to show it next on a form. So I would suggest trying to fetch the data using a get by ID step for that. Let me take a look at the chat to see if there's anything else there. Yeah, but that's what it looks like. So it actually saves and stores in the table, but it looks like Decisions is handling it in the flow to bring it out of that when you fetch it. So in our process here, it was able to just pull in the data unencrypted without you required to do anything there in order to show it on a form.
And if you have any support guys on the line, you can speak up. But I think the reason why it does that is because there's a file called the keys.dat file. And that keys.dat file in the root directory and Decisions, or the, your C drive, or wherever you have your database installed, that's the keys that the configuration database that Decisions is installed against uses to decrypt this material that Morgan's demonstrating here, where it's a PII field, but when you fetch it here, it will then decrypt it. I believe that's that interaction. If there's any support guys on the line, correct me because they'll know more of that interaction better.
I'll test it real quick through regular fetch entities as well before I wrap that up. We'll just have no fetch criteria because we know it's only the one. And we'll grab our first item. What did we name it? My example record. I should just be able to swap out our links and have that run for us. It's just mad because these are both named the same thing, but they should be of the same type record. Oh, didn't name it. Rename there and paste in what we want it to be called. And we'll debug that to see if we're getting the same behavior. Yeah, so a fetch entities is also pulling in the data already encrypted or decrypted so you can show it on a form. So hopefully there you'll be able to go back through and check your form, see where you're pulling it from. If you're using a report to pull it in, try swapping it to a fetch entities or a get by that particular ID and stuff for the user-defined step.
We're using flow execution extension data and in that configuration, we have an action item, and it
Mhm.
passes that flow extension ID, and we get from the database, we use get object by ID, and we
Mhm,
pass
okay.
that flow extension data, and it's still giving us double zeros.
When you double zeros on it, are you sure that it's saving correctly before, like when you write to that process folder, when you write that record?
Yeah, we saved the encryption step for last, and it was pulling everything just fine before, and then once we click that button, it doesn't get anything for
What do
those
you mean when you
fields.
say the encryption step?
We didn't click when we created the form. We didn't click the PII at that time because we were trying to set up and make sure everything worked, and we were saving that step for last. So, and once we figured everything out, we went ahead and decided to click that button on the data structure to
Okay.
save those as PIIs.
That's interesting. I can try and change it back to see if that would have, like, add a field and then afterwards change it to it. So let me add another field on there. But I believe it should have the same behavior there. So test 3. And working with the decimal. We'll save that. So we'll keep this unchecked like you had it originally and see if there's any kind of difference. So I got a lot of code compiles popping up. All right, so now I'm going to go back into our flow and just remap that decimal so it's pulling the other one here. As we know, our other decimal here is already showing, has that PII saved to it. So instead of clicking that one, we're going to go to test 3 now. In this record, though, we know we don't have anything saved to that. So before I debug that, do a quick selective update on it to provide it a value. Selective update will need the ID of it. And just whatever you change here in the inputs is what's actually going to be changed. So we'll make this a constant and we'll show for our decimal about 9874.61. So that's what we're going to save real quick for our record before we pass it into our form. And we'll debug that. Right click to see what actually went in and out there. It says it went through. So let's take a look if we now hook this back up to here. We don't need this anymore. And then double check that we've mapped it into test 3. So test 3 is going to be the data that we're showing on that box. So we'll debug to make sure that's coming up, and then we can swap it to give it that PII there. So that's coming in correctly. Closing out of here briefly, we're going to now take a look at the report, see if that's still showing up, and see the difference between those encryptions. We'll need our test 3 field added. So now I can see that these ones are encrypted. Test 3, we have not selected to put the PII encryption on there. So we can see the difference between those two decimals and how it looks in our records. So now we're going to go back to that data structure and see if we can recreate that change that you guys had done to now check it off. Let me see if I select it first. There we go. And we'll now change test 3 to contains PII. Select editor, configure, include field descriptions. That's the only thing we want to change. So I'll select save to apply that change to our data field. We'll give it a second here and see if that behavior changes. We know it should change definitely in our report. So let's take a look at that first. We'll refresh here. Yep, so now they're both encrypted. And let's take a look in our flow when we run it. So now we know we're fetching just that one record that we have. We're passing in the decimal for test 3. Let's hit our beautiful debug button. Oh, it went down no results. We're fetching PL example record. Let me try that again. Yeah, it's showing no results for us. Let's try hooking it up to our second one here, which is getting all of them. That would be interesting if it deleted the record when we changed it. Yep, that's what it's looking like. So when we changed it from having PLL to not having PL, we're seeing an issue where we can't fetch that data, even though we just saw it in our report. So I would think just by this example, and this is in version 6, that that's an issue for a DT. Very odd. So changing that PL, sorry, PII, I keep saying L, PII data actually causes an issue with that record. Yeah, so that might be what's causing it. So maybe the data is not being fetched properly, even though you had stored it correctly, like we had just done here. The data is not being pulled back entirely. So you may have to recreate data if you had data stored that previously wasn't encrypted. So I'm going to write that down as something that we should submit as a dev ticket to further investigate. But that's most likely why you're having that issue there and pulling in a 0 number there. That's a weird one for sure, because we definitely see it in our records. Yeah, so it's possible that you have to go through and either recreate records, or if we might have to fetch them another way. Has anybody seen this issue before, potentially on support or such? If not, we'll just go off call and look into that further with more time and commitment to it. I super appreciate you pointing that out. That's a very odd error. But yeah, let's try to real quick. I'm just very curious. I want to create a new one and see if we create a new one now that they're all set to, correctly show that PLL and have that setting, if it will cause us an issue. So we're just making a quick new record and just going to debug on that path to create the record that went through. So now we know that's definitely in the system. And let's pass it through one more time. Okay, so that new one came through and showed up properly, but the previous one, let's look on our results there. I know we're passing out just the first item. Yeah. So if we pass out all of them, I'm just going to copy this step real quick. And instead of passing out just the first item, just want to take a look to see if we're able to fetch all of them. If there's more than one that we're able to pull. From what we debugged before, I don't think that first one that we made initially is going to show up here. Just out of curiosity, let's take a look. Yeah, so we're only seeing that one result in our list here. So that previous record that we had before we changed to PAI on this test 3 field is not coming up in search results. So when you change a field's property from not having it to having it, it looks like it causes an issue with us being able to fetch that previous record with that previous configuration. Might be something to do with security, why it's blocking that, but definitely something we'll look into farther. Okay, I believe we've got some more questions. In the
I believe
chat.
John should be next. Morgan.
Yes. Okay, cool. And John's wanting to ask a question regarding the flow with form using an external link. Yep. So we can definitely take a look at that.
Do you want me to go ahead?
Sure, if you're ready to, if you want to step through what you have in there, sure thing.
Yep. So what I was trying to do, I've been working on basically working with Decisions version 6. And I was working on a flow that has a form inside. that basically gets some data, then opens the form and shows that data inside using the data grids, and then lets you update some information and then sends an email and do some stuff all inside that main flow. So what I was trying to do now is let the customer, we are going to add, we wanted to add this link to this flow on a Jira comment or sent by email, something like that. So a customer is able to open this flow externally without needing to have any credentials, just open the flow and let him or her update some stuff or do some stuff for that specific customer and ticket. So I was trying to do using the integration there inside the flow, but I couldn't make it work without using the credentials. I tried guest, it didn't work. I don't know if I have to use name session, and I don't know.
That's what I would suggest is a name session there.
Okay.
I can walk you through a little bit of that. Let's take a look. Name session, I believe it's going to be under security.
Also, there is another thing we got there on the setup. We got a run as that reads service UI dash form or webhook. I don't know exactly what is the best one to use.
Since you're showing a form to them, you're going to want to use the UI one because you're showing them some user interaction. You're showing them a form. So I would suggest the UI one for that, or else your form will not show. The integration details won't know that you're showing some kind of content. It'll just try to kick off the flow without doing that. Yeah, so definitely that section there. So you would just make a named session. So a named session is basically an account that has particular details that you can call separately. And you know, anybody can hit that, usually use their integrations and stuff for someone who doesn't have an account and such. We've got a couple of examples here that we've used for some demos and things like that to kick off your integration. So I'm just going to call this sample named session. And you have to pair it with an account. Traditionally, you want to make a particular account for this. So let's see if it'll let me do it without it. I can swap it off. But we have, like you can see, we have client service at decision. So that's a particular email address for a named session. Let me see, we have the demo service for Salesforce one and such. For now, I'm just gonna do warranty claim. So this one is also an account particularly made for a named session.
But it's just a simple account, right? You just create the account and then
just
link
an
it to the named session.
Exactly. So what I should have done first is make the account for the named session, pre-populated here. So we're going to name it sample service at decisions.com. That's kind of the naming convention we like to do. And then make sure it's a password that you can remember and come back in if you ever need to change that. And then you don't need to provide a name for it. And then in here, you can tie it to particular groups. Classically, if you're doing a named session, you'll probably just do an all users group. They're not going to have, you know, designer or admin kind of permissions there. So all users. And then you don't need to really do anything else there besides create the account. Since we made the name session first, what I want to do is actually go back and update that account. And so you can always edit your name session here to change the name or the account that's tied to it. So real quick, I will pick our good account for it instead of what we had just done. So it should be under recent. Nope. So we called it sample service at decisions.com. So when this link is clicked through your integration details, this is the account that it's logged in, and the current user will be this email address for those things that are run using this named session.
Perfect.
So let me navigate real quick back up to our Lunch and Learn folder. And let me create a quick UI flow for integration. UI flow. And so in here, we'll just use that form that we had created in the last one. So I'll go grab a show form step and pick our form. Should be under recent there for us. PI example would be great. So we'll pick that. Our end step is floating over here. And what we want to do now for your integrations, try to remember it in 6 and 7. It's a little different, but I believe you're working in 6. So let's take a look. Do we have it in properties here? Settings. You have some things in here about the flow execution messages and such there, but overall, here we go. Flow ended behavior. That stuff, service settings, allow REST calls. So we want to make sure that's on. By default, it should be, but that's something that will allow it.
So
And
that's directly on the flow, right? Let me check.
Yeah, this is directly on the flow, but to go to the full integration details in 6, you would select integration at the top, or you can get to it by right-clicking on the flow in the folder view and clicking integration details as well. So it should open up a new tab for you. And then you have this kind of view. I think this is based off of some of the color schemes on this particular environment, but you're going to want to use the UI form.
Perfect.
Because you're showing them that interaction, they're going to use it. You pick your named session, and it's going to pull in all the named sessions on this dropdown that you have created in that environment. So you're going to want to pick that one you particularly made for it. And then path or ID, it's just which way it's going to connect to the flow. ID is generally what we use here.
Yeah, I use ID for both of these, and then direct URL for the embed type.
Exactly.
It's fine. Yep.
And then you can choose some more things, like if you want the form, maximize means the form is going to take up the entire screen. If you choose a location, that means the form is not going to be. You can have it a specified height, or auto is what I tend to do, because you tend to make your forms like the shape and style that you like already in previewing it in your form editor. So I like to keep it on auto. But if you know you want it to take up the user's entire screen, you could use maximized in any of those. And then background, some other UI stuff you can provide it, a background color, maybe a border, shadow, spacing, and such. It's the standard like gray kind of look there. If you did the hex code for D0, D0, D0. There we go, D0, D0, D0. There, and you get a little preview. So this is with that color of it and what particular size it would be. Okay. So once you have all that, we're going to generate our code here. So that'll give you your integration details. So this is that link that you would, embed in a link to an email. So when they click that link, it opens them up to that form in that named session.
Can you try it on an incognito window to see if that works?
Yeah, absolutely. Let me. So it's probably going to log me out, but let's give it a shot. So I just pasted that in there, and this is what it shows up. So your form here.
What is not working for me, I don't know if it's something related with the way I've done it, but when I try this out, let me generate the UI code and put it here.
You hit that to get this URL down here.
Yep. And give me a sec.
No problem.
Updating the number here.
If you have inputs, they'll show up here in this URL as, say, if it was a string. So you say you're passing in name, and name is a string value. It'll say in here, name equals, and then say string. So you'd have to provide in it what you're passing in that slot where it says string, if you had inputs that are coming in and such.
Yeah,
like
yeah.
That.
Yeah, I have an issue ID and the account and the customer ID. So both of these are going to be completed using Jira automation, which is the way we are adding the comment and all that. So that's no problem.
Gotcha.
But the problem I'm having here basically is that when I run this on an incognito window, I see an error that says that reads flow run error must have can use permission to execute flow.
So that's going to be with your permissions on your actual in your environment. So here, if you tied it to just that all user group, and so we know our, excuse me, all these buttons popping up, we know that our particular flow is in this folder. So we can right click it and then go to manage and go to our permissions.
Yep.
Here, and what you want to check is, so it might be set at a higher level, probably at Sandbox that has this particular group, but you can always specify whatever folder you're looking at, or a group for all users. So we say all users, and we just give them the right just can use, or else the flow won't run for them if they don't have that property somewhere above where your flow is nested. So that's what you have to apply there for either just the direct folder above it or somewhere else.
Can't I do that for a specific flow? I have to do it for an entire folder.
You have to do it for that folder, I believe. Let me take a look. I don't think it's just for one flow when we do manage permissions. Yeah, it's at the above level. So that's why you kind of sort into folders so you can dictate that. But just because they have the can use function doesn't mean they can kick off any other flow in there. It just means that if they had the link to it, like this integration link that you created, that it'll work for them. It doesn't mean they have access to it in the environment when they look at it, or they can't kick off anything, or they can't look at it, you know, when it's the can use feature.
Okay, only having the link, and if I use ID, they don't have they won't have access to the other flows that are inside that folder and all that.
They won't see anything else there. It'll just be allowed to run with that permissions.
Okay. Okay, perfect. I'll try that. I will probably create a name session from scratch because I was using a test one, and then add directly link to all users, and then add this can use permission to all users on that specific folder. Okay, thank you very much for your help and your patience every time.
Oh yeah, no problem. Happy to do it. I just got familiar. We just did it a little bit in my project. I was like, oh yeah, I love named sessions. They're great. So they really do a good job. No problem at all. Okay, let's take a look. If we had any other questions. Well, we have a few more minutes. We don't think we have any open questions at the moment. Alex, did we answer your question, or is that something we didn't discuss? Okay, just because we're too late on time there. No worries, we can look at that tomorrow then. But repeat loop step and delay of 15 seconds and launch an async flow. Yeah, that flow, that's a wild flow right there because you're delaying it and it's async in multiple ways. So yeah, definitely a little bit more to unpack there. We'd want to build that whole thing out to get a proper look at it. But yeah, I think overall went really well. It's nice talking to everybody again, and hope that helped. Got me refreshed on version 6 a little bit in our beautiful Discover environment. So thanks y'all for all tuning in and for providing great questions. You can always submit questions ahead of time if you go when you hit register for the day for the particular call. At the bottom, I believe just that text box right there where you can put in any questions you have. All right, y'all have a great day. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Morgan.
Yeah, no problem.